In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Don't worry, this isn't going to be a religious video. Today I'm going to be talking about what I call visual and verbal civilizations, and how the one has risen and fallen over the millennia. I believe Christianity and Islam were essentially attempts to impose a verbal civilization on a predominantly visual and oral one. Under biblical law, deaf people weren't allowed to inherit property. This carried on for thousands of years because they can't hear, and the idea of God's commands being in anything other than words was just absurd. Blind people have been able to inherit property and have had civil rights for a long time, but deaf people, cut off from the verbal world, they were considered almost subhuman. When Islam came in the 7th century, or the 1st century from their point of view, they got rid of all visual civilization. They banned statues, they banned pictures of animals and people, they even banned music, because all these things are ways of representing God. They're ways of trivializing God. For them, God has to be invisible. It has to be something that you listen to, not something you see. The same thing happened with the Protestant Reformation, especially with Calvinism. They smashed statues, smashed stained glass windows, and if you find it a bit fanciful, this idea of a clash between visual and verbal civilizations, you should see there are some churches in England where we've uncovered beautiful pictures of Madonna, the Christ child, all kinds of things like that, but they are painted over with black letters, the scripts of the Bible. And the Calvinist argument, just the same as the Muslims one: thou shalt have no other God before me, and that means no idols. They emphasize the word and the ear above the eye and the picture. Now, Japan is a mixture of these. In Japan, people who talk literally, who mean what they say, they are regarded as childish or foreigners, stupid. They have a very refined verbal civilization. I mean, they use very elaborate language in their poetry, even compared to other civilizations. But comic books, manga, are very different from in the West. In the West, comics are still regarded as just for children, but in Japan they're read by old people, middle-aged, teenagers, young people, babies. Sorry, not babies. Children, I meant. They can be used for education, they can be used for fun, they can be science fiction, horror, they can be childish stuff, you name it. Fortunately, that culture is gradually penetrating into Europe and America. Not wholly, but comics are slowly being regarded as more adult. Now, I believe we had a visual civilization to begin with, when instead of writing, we would have long poems. We would use music, which is processed on the right side of the brain, the same side that processes pictures. And now this left side of the brain analysing language, that is not evolutionary, that has emerged in the past few thousand years, that it still isn't our natural language. Now, civilization was at its most verbal, I think, around the 16th, 17th centuries, because of the printing revolution, the rise in literacy, and of course that's why the Middle Ages was a very visual civilization, because most people couldn't read, so they needed things like stained glass windows to tell them Bible stories. They needed white poles with red spirals to tell them where a barber shop was. They needed 3 golden balls hanging down from a shop to show it was a pawnbroker, that kind of thing. But I'd say early modern Europe, very verbal. But since the 19th century, pendulum's swinging the other way. 1827, photography is invented. 1895, cinema is invented. I've already mentioned how comics have become more popular. They are the closest books can be to being visual. 1926, TV is invented. 1869, the typewriter was invented. Now, you may think, well, that's to do with words, surely. But no, it means you don't have to write anymore. Handwriting is essentially a verbal activity. That has been automated. You don't need good handwriting anymore. Okay? CVs, they can be sent by email. You don't need, it doesn't matter how dreadful your handwriting is. And, you know what? You don't need to learn how to spell anymore because of voice-operated keyboards. They're not very common at the moment, but as people become more used to them, it'll become easier and easier for people to forego typing and to just speak. For dyslexics, who can usually speak very well but often can't spell, this will be wonderful. This will liberate them, especially intelligent dyslexics who keep getting rejected for jobs because of silly little spelling mistakes. I mean, if they're becoming proofreaders, I can understand why they be rejected. But it's terrible when potential mathematicians and physicists get rejected. The iPod is going to create a much more visual civilization, not only because people are using the right side of their brain to listen to music a lot more, but also because when you're trying to get a stranger's attention, in the past you could have called their name out, but now, with their ears blocked up, they can't hear you. So, you have to use gestures, like a tap on the shoulder, or wave your hand in front of their face. Little things like that. Gradually, sign will become more and more common. Another innovation from Japan, this one, is the 2D barcode. This means that you can use your mobile phone camera to take a picture of these special barcodes, and they will be decoded into a website address. So you no longer need to type out the website. So as 2D barcodes become more common, you'll no longer need to read to surf the net, which I think is fantastic. And of course, computers are already very visual, very friendly to illiterates, because a lot of programs, you don't need to know how to spell the name, you just recognize the little icon. Like on my computer, for instance, I've got an icon for Skype, Google Chrome, uTorrent, Google Earth, so on and so on. And the reverse of voice-operated keyboards is, of course, text-to-speech. And finally, the invention of video games. That's created a much more visual civilization. They can be used in education. They can be used to teach people to read and write. But on the other hand, an illiterate person can cope with a video game because, once again, purely visual. Okay. Thank you, YouTube. I'll talk to you later. Bye now.